Alright, so we're starting our new unit on quadratic equations, and I want to show you the standard form for a quadratic equation. You know how when we were factoring a quadratic, we had the standard form for that? Well, it's basically the same thing, except it's an equation, so you have y equals in front of it. So y equals ax squared, because remember, a quadratic has the x squared, plus bx plus c. C is your constant. All right, so when graphed, a quadratic equation creates a U-shaped. Remember when we were looking at functions, we looked at the different types of shapes of graphs? Well, a quadratic is a U-shape, or like a horseshoe, and they call it a parabola. If you remember, I mentioned that back in functions. But in this unit, it's where you need to know it. It's the shape of a quadratic graph. It's called a parabola. And it says use your graphing calculator, but y'all are at home, most of you. You don't have your graphing calculator. But if you were to put this equation into the y equals, it's going to graph you an equation. And what it's going to do, it's going to look something like this. Yeah, let me redo that. Let me make my pen a little bit bigger. Okay, it's going to look something like, I'm terrible at drawing, y'all. It's going to look something like that. And right here is the bottom point. And if you'll notice, a parabola is symmetrical. Symmetrical. That's probably two M's in there. Yes, MM. Anyway, symmetrical means that it's going to be on each side is balanced. It's the same thing on one side as it is the other. Okay? So symmetrical. If they say you had a symmetrical face, meaning that your face, your eyes are in the same position and spot on each side, your nostrils are in the same position and level, your lips are split right down the middle, and they're shaped and in the same spot on each side. All right, and they say that most beautiful people, models and stuff, they have symmetrical faces. All right, because they are so perfect in that they're the same on each side and balanced that it takes a beautiful photograph. All right, so this case, your horseshoe is facing upward. So this is when A is positive, then you're going to have a parabola that's facing up. Okay? If A is negative, then your parabola is going to be facing downward. All right, so it could look something like this. It's symmetrical and it's facing downward. All right, when A is negative or A is positive, will tell you which way it's going to be going, up or down. And that's real important for you to know when you're graphing. Okay? All right, axis of symmetry is the vertical line that divides the parabola into two equal parts. Okay? All right, the formula for the axis of symmetry. This is real important. You have to memorize this. X equals negative b over 2a. So the opposite of b over 2a. Okay? X equals. All right? Also, the axis of symmetry is the same. And this is, I'm kind of adding this, is same as the x coordinate of your vertex. And we'll get to vertex in just a minute. All right. So if I can find my axis of symmetry, which is this vertical line, right, that splits it in half. Well, our vertex is the lowest or highest point on your graph. All right. So when you have a U-shaped like this, the lowest point is here, and that's your vertex. All right. It's also called your minimum. Okay. And that point, that ordered pair, that x and y, the x is also your axis of symmetry, because look, it's a vertical line on that x, right? All right. For the highest point would be when you have a parabola that's facing downward. Your highest point is here. It's your vertex, and they also call it the maximum. Okay. All right, let me give you a definition. A vertex is the turning point of the parabola. Do you remember back when we were doing tables, right? And we had a quadratic. And a quadratic is when the second difference was the same. And your parabola could be doing something like 2, 1, 0, negative 1, 2. All right. It's going one way and then it turns and goes the other. Remember I said that turn was your vertex? Okay. All right. Axis of symmetry. So if I have this equation, all right, we got A is the coordinate of x squared, which is 1, B is 8, and C is 15. So my axis of symmetry is x equals opposite of B, so negative 8 divided by 2 times A. Okay, x equals the opposite of B divided by 2A. So that's going to be negative 4. So my axis of symmetry is x equals negative 4. My vertex, the x in my vertex is also that. Okay? So what I can do is I can replace x in my equation with negative 4 to find my y coordinate. Okay? So this would be 16 minus 32 plus 15. So y equals negative 1. So negative 1 is the y coordinate of my vertex. So what I can do is sketch a graph of my parabola. So if my vertex is at negative 4, negative 1, it's going to be here. My A is positive, right? So if your A is positive, it means it's going to be pointing upward. So I know that it'll kind of look like that. Okay? All right. Let's flip over to the the back page here. All right, so here we have another equation. We want to find our axis of symmetry, our vertex, and we're just going to sketch a graph. All right, so A is -1, so that means it's going to be going downward, right? B is 10, and C is -23. So our axis of vertex is the opposite of B over 2 times A. So 5 divided by, -10 divided by -2 is +5. All right. Now, I can plug in 5 here. It's going to be negative parentheses 5 squared plus 10 times 5 minus 23. So that's -25 plus 50 minus 23, which is -25 and 50 is 25 minus 23, so it's 2. Okay, so if I have my axis of symmetry, and we know it's a -1, so it's going to be pointing downward, and my vertex is 5, 2, and it's pointing downward because A is a negative. Okay, my axis of symmetry is x equals 5. Remember, we said vertical lines, they only have an x in it because it never crosses the y-axis, right? So it's a vertical line crossing 5. All right, let's look at number 4. All right, we want to do, let's see, A is 4, B is 8, and C is -1. So the opposite of B, so -8, divided by 2 times A, so 2 times 4, so that'll be -1. So my axis of symmetry is the line x equals -1. My vertex, my x is -1, so I'm going to plug in 4 times -1 squared plus 8 times -1 minus 1. So this is going to be 4 minus 8 minus 1. So that's going to be -5. Okay. So if I had a coordinate plane, then I would have at -1, I'd have a vertical line. That's my axis of symmetry, right? And I would have my vertex down here. And I know because it's a +4 that it's going to be going upward. Now, I don't know how wide this is. I could do an XY, plug in 0 to find my Y. Let's just say that it was Y -3. 0, -3 was my y-intercept. So if this is -5, it went over 2 this way. That means it'd go 2 this way because it's symmetrical. So this would be -7, -3. Okay. All right. I wish they'd let you graph it on an actual. Okay, well this is just an introduction. We'll get into specific graphing in a couple of lessons. But this is just to get you familiar with the vertex and basically the graph, kind of what it looks like, faces up or down. All right, axis of symmetry. So A is -3, B is -24, C is -42. Okay, So opposite of b, so opposite of negative 24 is positive 24, divided by 2 times negative 6, negative 3. So 24 divided by negative 6 is negative 4. And I can plug that in, negative 3 times parentheses, negative 4 squared, minus 24 times negative 4, minus 42. So that's negative 3 times 16. And that's going to be positive 96 minus 42. And let's put that in. You're going to get, that, going to get y equals 6. Alright, so my axis of symmetry was negative 4. My x coordinate's negative 4. My vertex and my y is going to be positive 6. So if you have your axis of symmetry, x is the line x equals negative 4. Is it going to be pointing up or down? Well, I'll look at my A is negative, so it's going to be pointing downward. And your vertex is negative 4, 6. Okay. Well, let's do one more here. All right, this one, we only have 2 terms. So it's x squared. Remember, our general form is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Well, I got a a and I got a c. So a equals 1 and c equals negative 3. B, I don't have 1, so that means b is 0. Okay? So the opposite of b, which is not really a negative 0, divided by 2a, 0 divided by anything is 0. So whenever b is 0, that means your axis of symmetry is 0. Okay? And your vertex, your x is going to be 0, so that means it's also your y-intercept, isn't it? Alright, so I've got really my y-axis, and your we need to plug in to find what this is when x squared is 0, when x is 0, so it'd be 0 minus 3, so negative 3. And it's positive a, so it's going to be going upward. And your vertex is 0, negative 3. Okay? All right. Do your practice. Have a good night.